best thing that's ever been made out of any of my material. He said, that's not saying much. You know, he didn't like a lot of things that were done with his books and stuff. But the one thing that was such a kick for me is that he said, you know, you watch these things and sometimes the filmmaker will come up with something that I didn't think of. And he says, when I saw, because in the book, Chris picks up the gun and stares down the bad guys, you know, the older boys. And when we made this about Gordy, because it really wasn't Gordy's story in the book, it was kind of he was one of four guys, he was the observer. When we made it about his arc and about his journey to try to feel good about himself through his relationship with his friends, my partner Andy Scheidman came up with the idea of Gordy picking up the gun and being, you know, that was his emergence as a, you know, strong guy who felt okay about himself. And Stephen King says, when you had Gordy pick up that gun, I said, damn it, I wish I'd have thought of that. That made me feel so good because he was validating what we had done, and I felt really good about that.
And one of the beautiful parts of this is the pacing of this is just tremendous. It's almost like a song. There's so much good rests and then up and down. Was there a lot more shot that you brought into this, or how?
No, you know, I've made a lot of movies over the years, and I never get a lot of money to make the movies. I mean, you know, they don't give me because I make movies that are impossible to market. I mean, you'll see Flip. Flip is like a companion to this piece. This one is about, you know, the bonds of friendship and the strength of friendship when you're 12 going on 13. Flip is about the very powerful, confusing feelings of first love when you're 12 going on 13, and it takes place in the same time period, late 50s, early 60s, which is when I came of age. But the fact is, when you're starring, you know, 12, 13-year-olds, like in Flip and this, you can't market that. I mean, it's impossible to market. So they give me very little money. I mean, we made this for $7.5 million. Flip, which is now 25 years later, we made for $13.5 million. Which is less, actually, when you think about the inflation. So when I get such a little amount of money to make a movie because they don't see the potential. They don't see the potential in this or Princess Bride or Harry, any of them. They never saw any of it. That you got to really plan to make sure that you've got what you want, and it's on the page, you know, and you don't shoot a lot of extraneous things. I shot what we had, you know, maybe a little trim here and there, but basically that's what it is. And I know that I don't get a lot of money, so I have to plan very carefully for that. So we didn't have a lot of wasted stuff there.
I'm going to open it up for some questions here.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I just have a technical question.
Yeah.
First of all, I booked the land 10,000 lights, so we late most of the week too.
Yeah.
But I noticed in the scene where they were cutting across the road, it's actually the forest. Seeing on these streets, and I noticed some of the trees were like, is that like a...
Oh, God. I have the best story. It's the funniest, craziest story I've ever had making a movie. We shot the scene where they come upon the dead body, you know, when they're walking through the forest there, in the it was so sunny and hot in Oregon, and we took a silk and we silked in like half of Oregon. I mean, it was like, it went across the river, I mean, it was everything, just to get that moody feeling. Then we added the wind. We brought every Ritter, every E-fan, every, you know, fan to move, and on the wide shots, it wasn't enough. We had production assistants with monofilament, you know, underneath the camera, you know, holding onto the bushes and shaking the bushes so that we could get everything so that it all looked like it was moving like this. Well, there was a girl named Carol Bonneville. She was one of the production assistants, and her job was she had monofilament, right? And she was so now the boys, at the shop where the boys are coming down the hill to see the body, everything is going, and you can't hear anything, because when you know those Ritters, these are huge stage fans, make a tremendous racket, because we knew we were going to have to loop the whole thing anyway afterwards. It's a racket, it's such a noise, and Irby Smith, the AD, was on a bullhorn because nobody could hear action or anything because it was so noisy and the things were going. So now he's going, okay, everybody ready, and the camera is rolling like this, and before I yell action, I notice Carol Bonneville, it's not moving, you know, and there's all of a sudden there's a dead spot, you know, everything's blowing, and then there's a bush standing like this, nothing. So Irby Smith at the top of his lungs, I point to Irby, I said, Irby, look. He goes, at the top of his lungs on the bullhorn, "Carol, yank your bush!" That take was done. That was my favorite thing that ever happened on the set.
Right there. The memorization.
Well, we rehearsed the script. We rehearsed the whole thing with them many, many times. So by the time we were ready to shoot, they were pretty much up on whatever we had to do. But you know, you only shoot a couple of 2, 3, 4 pages a day, so they only focused on those pages that day. But they were very familiar with the script, you know, pretty much because we had rehearsed it for 2 weeks before.
Right there.
Hi. She asked how much I learned from my father. Well, I learned a lot from my father. Not so much him sitting down and talking to me or teaching me or anything like that, but just watching him, how he conducted himself. When I was very fortunate because when I was 13, 14, 15 years old, my father was doing the Dick Van Dyke Show in those days at the old Desilu Cahuenga. It was on Cahuenga between Melrose and Santa Monica. And every single day during the summer, when I was off from school, I would go with him to the studio. And I'd hang out at the studio all day. And I'd watch him work with the actors. I'd watch him work at the table, rewriting the script. I'd watch the director, John Rich, who worked with the cameras and blocked the cameras. And that and then All in the Family were my 2 big learning experiences that I took from that and learned how to make films. Because in a short period of time, those shows are only half an hour, you have to tell a story. And so I learned about story structure and how to tell a story, and also a little bit about how the cameras work, and also what plays and doesn't play for an audience, because the Van Dyke Show as well as All in the Family were done in front of a live audience. So you get a sense of, ooh, that's going to play, that's not going to play, and all of that was my learning experience. So I learned from my father, tremendous, and even to this day, I always think back because I think, he's done so many great things, and to me, the Van Dyke Show was probably the best of his creative work just as a writer, and it came out of him, it was his life, and he always taught me, write and direct what you know, something and that's why this film, of all the films I've done, was the most important because it was from my time, my childhood. It was the feelings I had with friends that I grew up with. I had 3 buddies just like that. It was interesting because when we made this film and it first came out, somebody came up to me and said, "Wow, I love this film so much. It reminded me of my childhood." And I said, "Well, you grew up in a rural area?" He says, "No, I grew up in Manhattan." And that's when I knew that we had hit something, because it wasn't about where you grew up or the time. It was about the feelings of friendship that you have with, like it says, you never have friends like you do when you're 12. So I learned from my dad, you work from places that you know, and that's why Flip, which is, like I say, it's a companion to this. When I read the book of Flip, it was set in the present day, but when I fell in love for the first time, I was 12 going on 13, that was the same time as this. So I set it back in that time period because I knew it. I know those songs mean something to me, the way they look, the cars, all those things meant something to me. So you write and create what you know, and you're better off because it's hard. I mean, listen, that's just the way I do it. I mean, look at James Cameron. I mean, as far as I know, he doesn't know anybody who's that tall and blue. He does great with his mind and fantasy, and look at